My name is Charlotte Reed. I'm 28 years old, and am waking up in an ICU with tubes down my throat, and the terrifying realization that my own father is trying to murder me. The fluorescent lights burn my eyes as consciousness creeps back in waves. My body feels like lead, my mind foggy and distant. Then I hear it, his voice. Cold, calculated, drifting through the crack in the door. Let her pass, we won't pay for the surgery. My blood turns to ice. The DNR is signed. Just let nature take its course. Hez, talking about me. My father is standing outside my hospital room telling doctors to let me die. And suddenly, with horrifying clarity, I understand why. $15 million. My mother's inheritance. Money hell get if I don't make it to my 30th birthday. Before we dive into how I got here, and how I survived, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you think you'd survive what I'm about to tell you, hit that like button and subscribe because this story gets darker before it gets better. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. 6 months before I found myself fighting for my life in that hospital bed, I lived what everyone thought was a charmed existence. I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in one of those pristine colonial houses with the perfect lawn and the white picket fence. My mother, Patricia Reed, was a self-made woman who built her fortune from the ground up. She started with a small investment firm in her 20s and turned it into a multi-million-dollar empire by the time she was 40. My father, Gerald Reed, worked in middle management at a pharmaceutical company, pulling in maybe $80,000 a year, but we lived like millionaires because of my mother's success. He drove a Mercedes, wore custom suits, played golf at the country club every weekend. Everyone said he was the supportive husband, the man who wasn't threatened by his wife's success, the father who showed up to every school play and soccer game. I believed it too. I worshipped him. My mother and I were incredibly close. She taught me everything about business, about independence, about being a strong woman in a world that tries to make you small. We had lunch together every Tuesday, just the two of us, at this little Italian place near her office. She'd tell me stories about the deals she closed, the challenges she faced, the satisfaction of building something from nothing. I wanted to be just like her. I went to business school, graduated top of my class, started working at a nonprofit managing their investment portfolio. My mother was so proud. She'd introduce me to her colleagues as my daughter, the brilliant one. My father would stand beside her, smiling, nodding, playing the proud papa. Looking back now, I can see the resentment simmering beneath his smile. But back then, I saw only love. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The words hit our family like a bomb. My mother, this unstoppable force of nature, suddenly fragile and mortal. The doctors gave her 6 months, maybe a year, with aggressive treatment. My father transformed overnight into the devoted caregiver. He drove her to every appointment, sat through every chemo session, held her hair when she got sick. He cooked her meals, organized her medications, managed her calendar. Everyone praised him. Gerald is such a saint, they'd say. Patricia is so lucky to have him. I believed it too. I'd come home from work and find him reading to her, adjusting her pillows, bringing her tea. My heart swelled with gratitude. My father was a hero. But there were moments, small, strange moments I dismissed at the time, that should have warned me. Like when my mother pulled me aside one afternoon, 2 months before she died, and gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Charlotte," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the treatments, "be careful. Promise me you'll be careful." I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head, tears sliding down her hollowed cheeks. "Just promise." I promised, thinking she was worried about me grieving, about me being alone. I had no idea she was trying to warn me about my own father. There were the private phone calls, too, conversations she'd have with her attorney that would end abruptly when my father entered the room. The way she'd changed the password on her laptop and kept it with her always. The sealed envelope she gave her lawyer with instructions not to open unless something happened to me. I thought it was grief making her paranoid. I was so wrong. She died on a Tuesday, 3 months ago, in the bedroom shed shared with my father for 30 years. He was holding her hand. I was holding her other hand. She looked at me one last time, tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Then she was gone. The funeral was elaborate, exactly as she would have wanted. Hundreds of people came. My father delivered a eulogy that made everyone cry, including me. He talked about their love story, their partnership, how lost he'd be without her. He dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. He accepted condolences with grace and dignity. He played his part perfectly, and I never suspected a thing. The will reading happened 2 weeks after the funeral. My mother's estate attorney, a sharp woman named Victoria Brennan, gathered us in her downtown office. The room smelled like leather and old books. My father sat beside me, holding my hand like we were in this grief together. Then Victoria began to read. My mother left me $15 million in a trust that would become fully accessible when I turned 30, just 2 years away. Until then, I'd receive a monthly stipend of $10,000 and could access funds for education or business ventures with trustee approval. My father inherited the house, which was worth about $2 million, and an additional $2 million in liquid assets. My mother had also named me as the executor of her charitable foundation, which managed another $5 million in assets earmarked for women's business education. I watched my father's face as Victoria read the terms. For just a second, maybe two, I saw something flicker across his features. Anger. Cold, hard, bitter anger. Then it was gone, replaced by that same gentle, grieving expression. He squeezed my hand. Your mother wanted to take care of you, he said softly. She knew you'd use that money to change the world. But I'd seen it. That flash of rage, and it planted a tiny seed of unease in my chest. The seed that would eventually save my life. Then came the real shock. After the formal reading, as people were gathering their things, a woman walked in. She was maybe 35, blonde, dressed in designer clothes that seemed too expensive, too flashy for a will reading. Sorry I'm late, she said, walking straight to my father and kissing his cheek. Not a friendly peck. A kiss that spoke of intimacy. This is Brenda Sutton, my father said, not meeting my eyes. We've been seeing each other. I was going to tell you, Charlotte, but with everything happening, I felt like I'd been slapped. My mother had been dead for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And he had a girlfriend who was comfortable enough to show up at a will reading and kiss him in front of everyone? Victoria's expression remained neutral, but I saw her exchange a look with her paralegal. Later, I'd learned that look meant she suspected what I couldn't yet comprehend. My father and Brenda had been together long before my mother died. 2 months after my mother's funeral, strange things started happening. It began small. Items in my apartment would be moved. I'd come home from work and find my laptop closed when I knew I'd left it open. Papers on my desk would be shuffled. I told myself I was forgetful, grieving, not paying attention. But then came the car. I owned a nearly new Toyota Camry, only 18,000 miles on it, meticulously maintained because my mother had taught me to take care of my things. One morning, I walked out to my parking garage and noticed a small puddle of amber fluid beneath the engine. Brake fluid. My stomach clenched. I called my mechanic, had the car towed. When he called me back that afternoon, his voice was uncertain. The brake lines are worn through, he said. But Charlotte, this car is practically brand new. This kind of wear shouldn't happen for another 50,000 miles at least. I felt cold all over. Could someone have tampered with them? I asked. A long pause. I can't say for sure. But it's unusual. Really unusual. I called my father, my voice shaking. He drove over immediately, all concern and comfort. He examined the mechanic's report, shook his head. Charlotte, honey, I think you're letting grief make you paranoid. The mechanic probably made a mistake with the initial inspection when you bought the car. These things happen. Please don't work yourself up over this. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders. You've been through so much. Losing your mother, dealing with the estate, all this stress. Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist. I worry about you. His voice was so gentle, so loving. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I pushed down the fear and let him take over. He insisted on handling everything. getting the car fixed at his mechanic, a guy he trusted. "You just rest," he said. "Let me take care of this." And like a fool, I did. 1 week later, I was driving home from work on the Taconic State Parkway. It was early evening, the sun just starting to set, casting long shadows across the winding road. Traffic was light. I was thinking about the foundation board meeting I had the next day, my mother's legacy that was now my responsibility. Then I needed to slow down for a curve. I pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. The pedal went straight to the floor with no resistance. My car was going 55 miles per hour down a hill toward a sharp curve with a guardrail that overlooked a 100-foot drop. Terror flooded my body like ice water. I pumped the brakes frantically. Nothing. I yanked the emergency brake. The car started to slow, but not enough. Not fast enough. I was going to die. I was going to sail through that guardrail and plummet into the ravine and die just like my father wanted. The thought came unbidden and certain. My father did this. My father tried to kill me. The curve was coming up fast. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a choice. I could try to take the curve and hope the guardrail held, or I could aim for the rock wall on the other side of the road and pray the impact didn't kill me. I chose the wall. I jerked the steering wheel hard left, still pulling on the emergency brake with all my strength. The car skidded sideways, tires screaming. Then impact, the sound of metal crunching, glass shattering, airbags exploding into my face. Pain bloomed in my chest, my head, everywhere. Then darkness. I woke up in the hospital 2 hours later. Broken ribs, concussion, internal bruising, lacerations across my face and arms from the glass. But alive, so incredibly, miraculously alive. The police came to take my statement. They told me it appeared to be mechanical failure, that my brake lines had completely ruptured. "Do you know if anyone has been working on your car recently?" the officer asked. "My father had it serviced last week," I said slowly, after I noticed brake fluid leaking. The officer wrote this down, nodded. "Well, follow up with the mechanic. These things happen sometimes with rushed repair jobs, unfortunately. You're lucky you survived." Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt targeted. My father arrived at the hospital an hour later with Brenda in tow. Not appropriate. Not normal. He should have come alone. But there she was, clutching his arm, wearing too much perfume and a concerned expression that looked rehearsed. "Charlotte, thank God you're alive," my father said, but his eyes were cold. Calculating. Not relieved. "What were you thinking, driving so recklessly? The police said you crashed into a wall. Were you on your phone? Were you distracted?" I stared at him. "My brakes failed, Dad. The brakes you just had fixed." His jaw tightened. "Don't start with conspiracy theories. You had an accident because you were driving too fast on a dangerous road. This is exactly what I was worried about. You're not stable right now. Maybe you shouldn't be driving at all. Maybe you shouldn't be managing your mother's foundation either. You're clearly not in the right state of mind." Brenda nodded sympathetically. "We're just worried about you, Charlotte. You've been under so much stress. Sometimes people do erratic things when they're grieving. We want to help you." The way she said "we" made my skin crawl. There was no we. She wasn't family. She was an interloper who'd wormed her way into my father's life with suspicious speed. I looked at her hard, really looked at her for the first time, and I saw calculation behind those blue eyes. This woman was not what she seemed. Neither was my father. But I was injured, vulnerable, alone. So I said nothing. I just nodded and said I was tired and asked them to leave. As they walked out, I heard Brenda whisper to my father, "She's becoming a problem." And my father whispered back, "Not for much longer." But I had one ally I didn't know about yet. The nurse checking my vitals, a woman named Ruby Mitchell, had been standing just outside the curtain, and Shed heard everything. Ruby had been a nurse for 15 years and Shed'd seen enough to know when something wasn't right. Shed'd been on duty 2 months earlier when my father visited me after a minor procedure, and Shed noticed how he asked detailed questions about my medications, my pain management, my vulnerability. It had struck her as odd then. Now it struck her as sinister. Ruby didn't know what she could do about it yet, but she filed it away in her mind. And when I needed her most, she'd be there. My father insisted I couldn't recuperate alone in my apartment. "You need someone to take care of you," he said, his voice firm. "You have broken ribs, Charlotte. You can't even lift a grocery bag. Come stay at the house. Just for a few weeks. Until you're healed." I didn't want to. Something in my gut screamed danger. But I was hurt, exhausted, scared, and grieving. Part of me still wanted to believe my father loved me, that I was imagining things, that grief was making me paranoid like he said. So I agreed. I moved back into my childhood home, into my old bedroom with its pale yellow walls and the bookshelf still filled with my high school trophies. Brenda had moved in. That should have been my first clue to leave. My mother had been dead for 3 months, and another woman was sleeping in her bed, wearing her robe, using her coffee mug. But I was too broken to fight. The first week was fine, almost normal. My father went to work each day. Brenda, who apparently didn't have a job, stayed home and played housewife. She'd bring me meals on a tray, fluff my pillows, ask about my pain level. She was attentive and sweet, and it all felt wrong, like watching a bad actress play a caring person. But the food was good and I was hungry and healing. Then the second week started and I began feeling sick. It started with nausea after meals, just slight queasiness that I blamed on the pain medication. Then it got worse. Violent vomiting, stomach cramps that doubled me over, weakness so profound I could barely stand. My father called the doctor, who came to the house and examined me. "Probably a stomach virus," he said. "These things happen. Rest and fluids." But it wasn't getting better. I was losing weight rapidly, pounds melting off my already thin frame. My skin turned gray. My hair started falling out. I couldn't keep anything down except water, and even that made me nauseous. My father and Brenda exchanged worried glances. They suggested maybe it was stress, maybe grief manifesting physically. Maybe I needed psychiatric help. Some people develop psychosomatic illnesses after trauma. Brenda said gently, sitting on the edge of my bed, stroking my hair like she cared. "Maybe you're making yourself sick because you can't cope with losing your mother. It's not uncommon. There are wonderful facilities that can help you work through this." I was too weak to argue, too sick to think clearly. I just wanted to feel better. The only time I didn't feel violently ill was when I skipped meals. One day, too nauseous to eat the lunch Brenda brought me, I poured the soup down the bathroom sink when she wasn't looking. That afternoon, I felt slightly better. The next day, I did the same with breakfast. Better still. A pattern emerged. The less I ate of the food Brenda prepared, the less sick I became. But my father and Brenda noticed. "You need to eat, Charlotte," my father said sternly. "You're wasting away. If you don't start eating, we'll have to hospitalize you and put you on a feeding tube." The threat was clear: eat the food, or face forced hospitalization where they'd have even more control over me. Then came the push for conservatorship. I'd been living with them for 3 weeks, sick and getting sicker, when my father sat me down for a serious talk. Brenda sat beside him, her hand on his knee. "Charlotte, we need to discuss your mental health," he began. "You're clearly not well. The doctors can't find a physical cause for your illness, which means it's psychological. And given your behavior, the paranoia, the refusal to eat, we think you need more intensive help. We've consulted with an attorney about getting a temporary conservatorship so we can make medical decisions for you. Just until you're stable." My blood ran cold. Conservatorship meant they'd control everything. My money, my medical care, my life. And once they had that control, they could do anything. They could have me committed. They could make me disappear. "No," I said, my voice weak but firm. "Absolutely not." My father's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice. You're a danger to yourself. We have documentation, doctors' reports. The accident was clearly a suicide attempt." "What?" "No, it wasn't. My brakes failed." "That's what you claim," Brenda interjected smoothly. "But the police report says you drove into a wall at high speed. And now you're starving yourself. These are classic signs of suicidal ideation." They'd planned this, every step. The accident they could claim was a suicide attempt. The illness they could blame on mental breakdown. The refusal to eat they could frame as self-harm. They were building a case to declare me incompetent so they could control my mother's money, and probably kill me in the process, making it look like suicide or illness. I saw it all clearly now, even through the fog of sickness. But I was trapped, weak, alone, or so I thought. That night, I forced myself to get up. My legs shook beneath me. I'd lost 25 pounds in 3 weeks, and my body felt like it belonged to someone else. I made my way slowly to the bathroom, using the wall for support. I needed to splash water on my face, to think clearly, to figure out a way out of this nightmare. As I steadied myself on the sink, I noticed Brenda's cosmetic bag on the counter. She must have used this bathroom earlier. Something made me look inside. Maybe instinct, maybe desperation, maybe my mother's spirit guiding me. I unzipped the bag and rifled through makeup and lotions. Then my hand closed around something that didn't belong. A plastic container, half hidden beneath a makeup pouch. I pulled it out. Antifreeze. The bright green liquid sloshed in the bottle. The label warned against ingestion. Fatal if swallowed. Causes kidney failure. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, weakness. My hands trembled as I stared at that bottle. Ethylene glycol poisoning. That's what was killing me. That's what Brenda had been putting in my food, slowly, methodically, day after day. A small amount wouldn't show up on standard blood tests, but accumulated over weeks, it would destroy my kidneys, make me sicker and sicker until I died or needed dialysis, and they'd blame it on mental illness, on self-harm, on grief. I wanted to scream. Instead, I used my phone to take pictures of the bottle, of its location in her cosmetic bag, of the brand and lot number. Evidence. Then, I carefully put everything back exactly as ID found it. My mind was racing. I needed to get out. Tonight. Right now. But I was so weak I could barely walk. How could I escape? I waited until midnight when I heard my father and Brenda go to bed. Then I waited another hour to be sure they were asleep. I packed nothing. Brought nothing except my phone and wallet. I crept down the stairs, every step agony with my broken ribs only half healed. I made it to the front door, unlocked it as quietly as possible. Then I heard their voices from upstairs. My father and Brenda, talking in low, urgent tones. I froze. "We need to speed up the timeline," my father was saying. "She's suspicious." "I can see it," Brenda replied. "Then we do it tomorrow. The amount I gave her today should finish it. She'll go into acute kidney failure by morning. Well, rush her to the hospital, tell them she's been suicidal, produce the fake DNR, and let nature take its course. Once she's gone, you inherit everything as next of kin. The trust clauses don't matter if she dies before 30. My father's response was cold and businesslike. "And you're sure the DNR will hold up?" "I've forged signatures before," Brenda said. "It'll be fine. The hospital will be so focused on saving her life they won't look too closely at paperwork until it's too late. By the time anyone questions it, she'll be dead." I didn't wait to hear more. I opened the door and ran. Well, I tried to run. It was more of a stumbling, gasping escape into the dark October night. I made it 3 houses down before I collapsed on a neighbor's lawn, my phone clutched in my hand. I dialed the only person I could think of, my best friend from college, Simone Harper, who lived 20 minutes away. "Simone," I gasped when she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "I need help, please. Hez trying to kill me." Simone didn't ask questions, she just came. 15 minutes later, her car pulled up and she helped me into the passenger seat. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. "Hospital," she said, but I grabbed her arm. "No, your place, please. I'll explain everything." So she took me home and I told her the whole story while sitting on her couch wrapped in blankets, barely able to get the words out between shaking and crying. The car accident that wasn't an accident. The poisoning. The overheard conversation. The plan to kill me and steal $15 million. I showed her the pictures of the antifreeze. I expected her to think I was crazy. Instead, her face went hard and angry. "I'm a criminal defense attorney," Simone said, her voice tight. "I know what evidence looks like. And Charlotte, you have enough here to go to the police. But we need more. We need medical proof. Can you give me permission to get your medical records?" I nodded. Within an hour, even though it was 2 in the morning, Simone had contacted an ER doctor she knew, a friend who owed her a favor. We went to the hospital and I gave blood and urine samples. The doctor, skeptical at first, became increasingly concerned as the tests came back. "You have significant levels of ethylene glycol in your system," he said grimly. "Another few days of exposure and you'd be in complete kidney failure. You'd need dialysis or a transplant. This is poisoning. Deliberate poisoning. I'm legally required to report this." "Not yet," Simone said quickly. "Give us 24 hours. We need to build an airtight case. If we go to the police now with just this, her father will lawyer up and destroy evidence. We need everything." The doctor hesitated, then nodded. 24 hours. Then I'm calling it in. Simone took me back to her apartment and I slept for 12 hours straight, the first real sleep it had in weeks. When I woke up, she had news. "I called your mother's estate attorney," Simone said. "Victoria Brennan. She wants to meet with us, today. She says she has information your mother left for you." We met Victoria at her office that afternoon. I was still weak, still sick, but the IV fluids at the hospital had helped. Victoria looked at me with genuine sympathy and something else. "Guilt. Your mother knew," she said without preamble. "She suspected your father was having an affair. She hired a private investigator 6 months before her diagnosis. What she found destroyed her, but she kept quiet because she loved you and didn't want to break up the family while you were finishing graduate school. Then she got sick and she realized she needed to protect you from beyond the grave." Victoria slid a sealed manila envelope across her desk. "She gave me this 2 months before she died. Instructions to give it to you if anything at all, seemed wrong after her death. Your car accident triggered my obligation to hand this over." My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs. My father and Brenda at a casino in Atlantic City. The date stamp showed 2 years ago. 2 years before my mother died. They were kissing, laughing, his hand on her thigh. More photos. Them checking into a hotel. Them at dinner. Photo after photo documenting a long-term affair. But that wasn't all. There were financial records. Bank statements showing my father had been embezzling from my mother's company for 3 years, small amounts that added up to over $600,000. Records of gambling debts to a casino in Vegas, debts that totaled $800,000. My father owed dangerous people dangerous money, and the only way out was my inheritance. "There's more," Victoria said quietly. She handed me another folder. "Your mother hired the private investigator to keep watching your father even after her death. She wanted to protect you. The investigator's name is Garrett Flynn. Hess waiting outside. He has current information." I could barely breathe as Garrett Flynn entered the office. He was a man in his 50s, gray hair, serious eyes. He sat down and opened his laptop. "Your father's fiancée is not who she claims to be," he began. "Her real name is N.T. Brenda Sutton. It's Brenda Marlowe. She has a criminal record under that name in Florida. Fraud, identity theft. She served 2 years. Before she met your father, she was involved with another wealthy older man in Tampa. That man's wife died under suspicious circumstances. Drug overdose ruled accidental. The man inherited everything. 6 months later, Brenda disappeared with half his money. He committed suicide before police could investigate fully." I felt sick all over again. "She's done this before," Garrett nodded. "I believe she targets wealthy men with family money they don't control. She seduces them, convinces them to eliminate whoever stands between them and the inheritance, then takes her cut and vanishes. Your father's gambling debts made him the perfect mark. Desperate, greedy, morally flexible. She saw him coming a mile away." Simone leaned forward. "So we have motive, we have history, we have evidence of poisoning. We need to catch them in the act, we need a confession, or we need to stop them before they try again," I said, "because they're not going to stop until I'm dead." We spent the next 6 hours planning. Victoria provided copies of all my mother's evidence. Garrett gave us his entire investigative file. Simone contacted a prosecutor she trusted and briefed them off the record. We prepared to go to the police in the morning with everything. But none of us anticipated what would happen that night. None of us knew my father and Brenda had already moved to Plan B. And plan B was so much worse. The text came at 8 p.m. From my father. Charlotte, please come home. I know about the poisoning. It was Brenda. I've kicked her out. I found the antifreeze. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Please forgive me. Let me make this right. Come home. I stared at the message. Simone read it over my shoulder. It's a trap, she said immediately. Obviously a trap. But the prosecutor briefed, a woman named Dana Wright, saw an opportunity. Go in wired, she said. Well, have police outside. You'll have a panic button. If he confesses on tape, we have him. If he tries anything, we'll be there in 30 seconds. I didn't want to do it. Every instinct screamed danger, but Dana was persuasive. This is our chance to get a confession, otherwise it's your word against his, a grieving daughter with mental health concerns versus a respected businessman. Even with the evidence, a good defense attorney will tear you apart on the stand. But if we have him on tape admitting to the poisoning, to the murder attempts, it's over. So I agreed. They fitted me with a wire, a tiny microphone hidden under my shirt. They gave me a panic button disguised as a keychain. They positioned unmarked cars outside my father's house. Simone wanted to come with me, but Dana said no, it would look suspicious. So I went alone. I pulled up to my childhood home at 9 p.m. The house was dark except for the living room lights. I walked to the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought the wire would pick it up. I knocked. My father opened the door and for a second I saw genuine relief cross his face. Or very good acting. Charlotte? Thank God, he said, pulling me into a hug that made my skin crawl. Come in. We need to talk. I need to explain everything. I walked into the living room and my blood turned to ice. Brenda was there, sitting on the couch, smiling. Surprise, she said sweetly. My father closed the door behind me. I heard the lock click. Dad, what's going on? You said she was gone. His face changed. The mask dropped. What looked back at me was cold and empty. I lied, obviously. Did you really think I'd confess over text? Did you really think I didn't know you've been running around gathering evidence? We have friends everywhere, Charlotte, the prosecutor's secretary, the hospital clerk. We knew you went to the ER. We knew you got those test results. We knew you'd try something like this. He lunged forward and grabbed me, his hands like iron on my arms. I screamed. He slapped me hard enough to make my ears ring. Shut up! The house is soundproofed now. Did you think I wouldn't prepare? Brenda stood up, pulling something from her purse. A syringe. This is going to be so much faster than the antifreeze, she said conversationally. A massive dose of benzodiazepines mixed with fentanyl. You'll go to sleep and never wake up. We'll call 911, hysterical, saying we found you unconscious with a suicide note. We've already written it, very touching. About how you couldn't live with your grief, how the pain was too much. By the time the ambulance arrives, you'll be barely alive. And then, well, make sure you don't stay alive long. I fought as hard as I could. But my father was strong and I was still weak from weeks of poisoning. He forced my mouth open. Brenda dumped pills inside, then clamped my jaw shut and plugged my nose until I had to swallow or suffocate. I felt them go down. Then the needle. Brenda stabbed it into my arm, pushing the plunger. Liquid fire entered my veins. The wire won't matter, my father said as darkness crept in around my vision. Well, destroy it before the police arrive. And the panic button you never got a chance to press is useless. We jammed the signals. Your friends outside can't hear anything. Can't reach you. By the time they realize something's wrong, you'll be on your way to the hospital dying. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was Brenda's laugh. Cold, triumphant, evil. I don't remember the ambulance ride. I don't remember arriving at the hospital. The drugs pulled me under so deep I was barely alive. When consciousness flickered back for just a moment, just a brief second, I heard voices. Machines beeping. My father's voice, smooth and convincing. She's been deeply depressed. Suicidal. We've been trying to get her help, but she refused. This was inevitable. A doctor's voice, sympathetic. I understand. We'll do everything we can. Then my father again, quieter. Actually, there's something you should know. Charlotte has an advance directive, a DNR, do not resuscitate. She was very clear that if she ever attempted suicide, she didn't want extraordinary measures. She wanted to be allowed to pass naturally. That's unusual for someone so young, the doctor said, uncertain. Do you have documentation? Right here, my father said. I heard papers rustling. Signed and notarized. Lies, all lies. I never signed anything. But I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The drugs had paralyzed me completely. I was screaming inside my own body, but nothing came out. Let me review this, the doctor said. Then another voice. My father, speaking to someone else. The nurse, maybe. His voice lower now, more urgent. Let her pass. We won't pay for the surgery. The DNR is clear. Just let nature take its course. He was standing right outside my room, telling them to let me die. And I could do nothing. Nothing except pray that someone, anyone, would see through his lies before it was too late. But someone did see through it. Ruby Mitchell, the nurse who'd been on duty the night of my car accident, happened to be working that shift. She recognized me immediately when they wheeled me into the ICU. And she recognized my father. The man who'd seemed so wrong before, who'd asked such strange questions, who'd made her instincts scream danger. Now here he was again, with his daughter dying, and he was trying to stop treatment. Ruby looked at the DNR paperwork. Something felt wrong. The signature didn't look right. The date was recent, just 2 days ago, but the notary stamp was smudged and unclear. There were no witness signatures, which was required in New York State for advance directives. She'd seen enough DNRs to know this one was suspicious. I need to escalate this to the ethics board, Ruby told the attending physician. Hospital policy requires review for DNR orders on patients under 35, especially in suspected suicide cases. The doctor, grateful for the protocol backup, agreed. Well, proceed with stabilization until the board reviews the paperwork. My father's face went dark. That's not acceptable. I'm her father. I'm making the medical decisions. The DNR is valid. Ruby stood her ground. Sir, I understand your concern, but this is hospital policy. The review will only take a few hours. Well, keep her comfortable in the meantime. But Ruby wasn't waiting for the ethics board. As soon as she stepped away from my room, she pulled out her phone and called the only connection she had to my life. Simone. Ruby had gotten Simone's business card 3 months ago when Simone had visited me after the car accident, and Ruby's instincts had told her to keep it. Now she was glad she had. This is Ruby Mitchell from Mercy General, she said when Simone answered. I'm a nurse. Charlotte Reed was just admitted. Her father's here with a DNR and something's very wrong. Simone's response was immediate. Don't let them stop treatment. I'm calling the police. I'm calling her attorney. Keep her alive. Do you understand me? Keep her alive. 20 minutes later, Victoria Brennan arrived with an emergency injunction from a judge. Police officers followed. They stormed into the ICU and confronted my father. Mr. Reed, we need you to step away from your daughter's room, the lead officer said. We have a court order suspending the DNR pending investigation of fraud. My father's face went white. This is ridiculous. I'm her father. I have every right to make medical decisions. Victoria stepped forward, her voice ice. You have no rights here. This DNR is a forgery. We have a handwriting expert standing by. And I have a judge's order placing Charlotte's medical care under a temporary guardian appointed by the court. You're done. Brenda, who'd been standing in the corner trying to look invisible, suddenly bolted for the door. But police were already there. Brenda Marlowe, also known as Brenda Sutton, you're under arrest for attempted murder. They cuffed her as she screamed and fought. My father tried to run too, but got 3 steps before officers tackled him. Gerald Reed, you're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. As they read him his rights, Victoria came to my bedside. I was still unconscious, still barely alive, but she held my hand. Fight, Charlotte, she whispered. Your mother didn't save you just for you to give up now. The doctor worked on me for hours, pumping my stomach, running toxicology, administering activated charcoal and fluids and medications to counteract the overdose. My kidneys were failing from the antifreeze poisoning. My respiratory system was shutting down from the drugs. I was dying. But I was also fighting. Deep in my unconscious mind, I heard my mother's voice. You're stronger than they know. Stronger than you know. Fight. So I did. 3 days I spent in that twilight between life and death. 3 days the doctors weren't sure I'd make it. But on the 4th day, I opened my eyes. Victoria was there. Simone was there. Ruby was there. And the police were there. Welcome back, Detective Jackson Kane said with a gentle smile. We have a lot to talk about when you're ready. But first I needed to heal. They moved me out of ICU to a regular room. The doctors explained everything. How close I'd come to dying. How the ethylene glycol had damaged my kidneys, possibly permanently. How the overdose had nearly stopped my heart. You're a fighter, my doctor said. Not many people survive what you survived. I didn't feel like a fighter. I felt broken and betrayed and so incredibly tired. But as the fog cleared and my strength returned, anger came too. My father had tried to murder me, multiple times, and had nearly succeeded. The police told me he and Brenda had been separated for interrogation and both had confessed, each trying to blame the other. Your father claims it was all Brenda's idea, Detective Kane said, that she manipulated him, seduced him, convinced him you were a threat to his financial security. But we have evidence showing he was planning this before he even met her. The embezzling, the gambling debts. He needed that money. Brenda just provided the method. I felt sick, not from the poisoning this time. From the knowledge that my own father valued $15 million more than my life. Over the next 2 weeks, as I recovered in the hospital, the full scope of the betrayal came to light. Detective Kane visited daily with updates. We've been digging into your father's finances, he said one afternoon. It's worse than we thought. He didn't just embezzle $600,000. It's closer to $1.2 million over 5 years. He was very good at hiding it. Your mother's company was so successful that small amounts going missing didn't trigger alarms. I felt bile rise in my throat. My mother had worked so hard to build that company, and my father had been stealing from her the entire time. There's more, the detective continued. We found communications between your father and Brenda dating back 3 years. They met at a gambling addiction seminar, ironically. She was there running a con on another attendee. They started talking. She recognized that your father had access to wealth but didn't control it. She saw an opportunity. But the worst revelation was still to come. Your father's sister, Lucille Reed, has been arrested as well, Detective Kane said. She was aware of the affair. She knew about the embezzling. She helped your father hide money in offshore accounts. And she knew about the plan to kill you. My aunt, my mother's sister-in-law, who'd come to every holiday, every birthday. Who'd hugged me at my mother's funeral and told me she'd always be there for me. She'd known. And Shed said nothing. Why? I whispered. Money, the detective said simply. Your father promised her $500,000 from your inheritance. She was drowning in credit card debt. She made a choice. The betrayals kept coming. My father's plan had been meticulous. Had started by slowly convincing my mother to delay her cancer treatment, telling her she should try holistic methods first, that chemo was poison, that she should trust natural healing. My mother, frightened and desperate, had listened. Shed delayed treatment for 2 precious months. By the time she started chemo, the cancer had spread too far. The doctors said if Shed started treatment immediately, she might have had years. Instead, she had months. He killed her too, I said to Simone, who'd barely left my side. Maybe not directly, but he killed her. Simone squeezed my hand. He killed the woman she was. He stole her last years. But Charlotte, she knew. At the end, she knew. That's why she prepared everything to protect you. She loved you enough to save you from beyond the grave. My mother's brother, Isaac Hayes, came to visit me in the hospital. He was a man I barely knew because there'd been a family rift years ago. He sat beside my bed, tears streaming down his face. I tried to warn her, he said. 5 years ago, I saw Gerald with another woman. I told Patricia. She didn't believe me. Said I was jealous of their marriage, that I'd always disliked Gerald. We stopped speaking. I should have pushed harder. I should have made her listen. I reached for his hand. It's not your fault. She loved him. Love makes us blind. Isaac shook his head. She left me a letter. Her attorney gave it to me after her death, with instructions to give it to you if anything happened. She apologized, said I was right, said she'd been a fool, but she'd made arrangements to protect you. She begged me to watch over you. And I failed. I should have been there. But the most disturbing revelation came from the police investigation into Brenda's past. She wasn't just a con artist. She was a serial predator. We've linked her to 3 other cases in 3 states, Detective Kane said. In Georgia, a man named Walter Bryant died of a heart attack 3 weeks after his wife died in a suspicious fall. Brenda had been dating Walter. She disappeared before anyone could question her, taking $400,000 had wired her. In Tennessee, a widower named Frank Sutton, that's where she got the last name, died of an overdose 6 months after his daughter died in a car crash with faulty brakes. Brenda inherited everything, $2 million. She'd married him 2 weeks before his death. In Texas, another man, Roger Martinez, is currently serving life in prison for murdering his mother. His girlfriend at the time? Brenda Marlowe. She convinced him his mother was going to change her will. She helped him plan it. Then she testified against him, played the shocked girlfriend, and walked away free. I stared at the detective in horror. How many people has she killed? We don't know for sure, but we think at least 6, possibly more. She's very good at what she does. Targets men with family money they can't access. Convinces them to eliminate whoever stands between them and the inheritance. Takes her cut and vanishes. Your father was just her latest mark. But my father wasn't innocent. Head made his choices. Your father had 2 previous incidents on his record we uncovered. Detective Kane continued. When he was 25, before he met your mother, he was investigated for insurance fraud. Claimed his apartment was burglarized. Filed for $50,000 in stolen goods. The insurance company suspected fraud but couldn't prove it. He got the money. Then 10 years ago, one of your mother's business partners accused him of stealing from the company. Your mother shut down the investigation, paid the partner to go away. She protected him. And he repaid her by plotting her murder and yours. The trial began 6 months after my father and Brenda's arrest. I'd spent those months healing, both physically and mentally. My kidneys had recovered about 80% function. The doctors said I was lucky, that many ethylene glycol poisoning victims needed lifelong dialysis or transplants. I'd started therapy with a trauma specialist named Theodore Walsh, working through the PTSD, the nightmares, the hypervigilance that made every meal suspect and every person a potential threat. It was slow, painful work. But I was determined to survive in more than just body. I wanted to live. The trial was held at the county courthouse, a granite building that seemed designed to intimidate. The prosecution was led by Dana Wright, the prosecutor who'd tried to help me before everything went wrong. She'd apologized 1,000 times for not providing better protection the night of the attack. I'd forgiven her. She couldn't have known they'd jammed the signals, that they'd prepared so thoroughly. Now she was determined to make sure my father and Brenda paid for every crime. The courtroom was packed, media everywhere. This case had captured national attention. Wealthy man tries to murder daughter for inheritance was the headline that launched 1,000 think pieces about greed and family and betrayal. My father was charged with 3 counts of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and a dozen other charges. Brenda faced similar charges plus her outstanding warrants from 3 states. My Aunt Lucille was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, being an accessory to attempted murder, and fraud. They had separate trials but the evidence overlapped. I had to testify at all 3. Sitting in that witness stand, looking at my father across the courtroom, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. He looked older, grayer, diminished, but when our eyes met, I saw no remorse, only anger that I'd survived. Dana Wright walked me through every detail: the car accident, finding the antifreeze, the poisoning, the overdose, the forged DNR, the entire horrific timeline. Charlotte, why do you think your father did this? She asked. I took a breath. $15 million. He was drowning in debt. Had stolen from my mother, gambled away fortunes, and owed dangerous people money he couldn't pay. The only way out was my inheritance. And the only way to get my inheritance before I turned 30 and gained full control was to kill me. The defense attorney, a slick man named Harrison Webb, tried to paint me as a mentally unstable young woman who'd misinterpreted her father's attempts to help her. "Isn't it true you were suffering from severe depression after your mother's death?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "because I was grieving. Not because I was suicidal or delusional. But you crashed your car into a wall. The police report indicates it could have been intentional. The police report also indicates my brake lines were completely severed by the mechanic my father hired to fix my car after I reported brake fluid leaking. The same mechanic who's testified that my father paid him $5,000 to cut the lines in a way that would fail within a week. The defense had no answer for that. Or for the toxicology reports showing ethylene glycol. Or for the bottle of antifreeze found in Brenda's possession with only her fingerprints on it. Or for the recordings of my father and Brenda discussing the murder plot that police had recovered from Brenda's phone. Or for the forged DNR that handwriting experts confirmed matched neither my handwriting nor my signature. Or for the testimonies of 3 other women whose family members had died under suspicious circumstances after Brenda entered their lives. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the 4 women stood and read the verdicts. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant Gerald Reed guilty. Guilty. On every count. 3 counts of attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement. All guilty. Brenda's verdict came 2 days later. Also guilty on every charge, plus her charges from the other states. My Aunt Lucille took a plea deal, testifying against my father in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 12 years. She'd serve at least 8. I felt nothing when I heard it. She was already dead to me. Sentencing happened a month later. My father stood before the judge, finally allowed to speak. "Your Honor, I made terrible mistakes. I was desperate, manipulated, afraid. I never wanted to hurt Charlotte. I love my daughter." I almost laughed. Love. He didn't know the meaning of the word. The judge, a stern woman named Judith Carter, looked at him with undisguised contempt. "Mr. Reed, you attempted to murder your daughter, the child you raised, the child your wife loved, 3 separate times. You poisoned her. You sabotaged her vehicle. You tried to force a medical system to let her die. You forged documents. You stole from your dying wife. You showed no remorse, only anger that your plans failed. I see no redeeming qualities in you. I sentence you to 45 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 30 years. My father crumpled. He'd be 80 years old before he was even eligible for parole. Effectively, a life sentence. Brenda's sentencing was even harsher. The judge in her case, given her history and the multiple murders across multiple states, sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She screamed as they dragged her away. "This isn't fair! Gerald did everything. I was just helping him. This isn't fair." But it was fair. It was justice. Incomplete, insufficient justice that couldn't give me back my mother or my innocence or my ability to trust. But justice nonetheless. There was also a civil trial. I sued my father for the money he'd embezzled from my mother's company. The court awarded me $900,000, which was everything my father had left after legal fees. His house, the house he'd grown up in, was sold to pay the judgment. I couldn't bear to keep it anyway. Too many ghosts, too many memories now tainted with the knowledge of what he'd planned in those rooms. I donated half the money to organizations fighting elder abuse and financial crimes. The other half went into the foundation in my mother's name. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of the mirror in my new apartment and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. I'd gained back the weight I'd lost, plus a little more. My hair had grown out, no longer falling out in clumps. My skin had color again. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was in my eyes. They looked older, wiser, harder, but also somehow more alive. I'd survived something most people couldn't imagine, and I'd come out the other side determined not just to survive, but to live fully. Therapy with Theodore had been transformative. Wed worked through the PTSD, developing coping strategies for the nightmares and panic attacks. Wed processed the grief, not just for my mother but for the father I thought I'd had, the man who'd never really existed. Grief for a living person is complicated, Theodore had told me. You're mourning someone who's still alive, but who was never who you thought they were. That's a unique kind of loss. He was right. I grieved my father while also hating him. I grieved my childhood, now revealed as a lie. I grieved the innocence of believing family meant safety. But through that grief, I found strength. I found myself. I'd rebuilt relationships with my mother's side of the family. My uncle Isaac had become a father figure, calling me every Sunday, taking me to dinner once a month. Just being present in a way my father never truly was. Had apologized so many times for not fighting harder to warn my mother. I kept telling him it wasn't his fault. Eventually, he started to believe me. I'd also grown close to my mother's cousins, a whole branch of the family I'd neglected during my father's reign. They welcomed me back with open arms and no judgment. Family, I learned, isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to show up. Ruby, the nurse who'd saved my life, had become one of my closest friends. We met for coffee every week and she'd tell me stories from the hospital while I told her about my work with the foundation. You know, I almost didn't question that DNR, she admitted one day. I almost just accepted it. Something made me look closer. Call it instinct, call it divine intervention, call it whatever you want. I'm just glad I listened. I was glad too. She'd given me a second chance at life. That was a debt I could never repay. But I tried by being the best friend I could be. She introduced me to her family, her kids, her world. She taught me to trust again, one small step at a time. Simone, who'd been there from the beginning, remained my rock. She'd taken a leave of absence from her law firm during my recovery to make sure I was never alone. She'd fielded media requests, managed well-meaning but overwhelming visitors, and generally protected me from the world while I healed. You're not getting rid of me that easily, she said when I tried to thank her. We're sisters now. Trauma bonded for life. She was right. We were sisters in every way that mattered. The foundation I'd established in my mother's name became my life's work. The Patricia Reed Foundation focused on 3 causes that meant everything to me. First, supporting children who'd lost parents to cancer, providing grief counseling, financial assistance, and mentorship programs. Second, helping victims of domestic violence and financial abuse escape dangerous situations, funding safe houses and legal aid and job training. Third, providing resources to people targeted by financial predators, educating communities about scams and fraud, and offering legal support to victims. In the first year, we helped 63 families. 63 lives changed because of my mother's money, used the way she would have wanted. I hired staff who shared the mission. A victim's advocate named Julian Cross, who'd himself survived attempted murder by a family member. A financial crimes expert named Nora Phillips, who'd spent 20 years with the FBI. A family law attorney named Cameron Drake, who worked pro bono for half his cases. Together, we built something beautiful out of something horrific. We took the money my father had tried to kill me for and used it to save lives. There was poetry in that, justice in that, healing in that. I even started dating again, though cautiously. A man named Wesley Brooks who worked at a bookstore and knew nothing about my past when we met. We took things slow. I told him everything on our 5th date, expecting him to run. Instead, he said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. It doesn't change how I see you. You're not defined by what was done to you. You're defined by how you survived it." He was kind and patient and understood when I needed space. It was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had, because now I knew what red flags looked like. I knew what manipulation felt like. I knew the difference between love and control. My father had taught me that, though not in the way he'd intended. I visited my mother's grave every month. I'd sit on the grass beside her headstone and tell her everything. About the trial, about the foundation, about my life. About how I'd survived and how I was thriving. About how her love had literally saved my life because she'd prepared for this even when she was dying. "You knew," I'd whisper. Somehow you knew. And you protected me. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for loving me enough to see the truth. Thank you for the evidence, for Victoria, for the sealed envelope. Thank you for fighting for me even when you were fighting for your own life. Sometimes I'd cry, sometimes I'd laugh, remembering good memories from before everything went dark. But I always left feeling lighter, more connected, more certain that love was real even when it came wrapped in tragedy. The last time I visited my father in prison, I went to get closure. He sat across from me in the visitation room, orange jumpsuit hanging off his now thin frame, eyes dull and defeated. "Why did you come?" he asked. "To tell you that I forgive you," I said. His eyes widened with hope. Then I continued. "Not for you, for me. I forgive you so I can let go of the hate, so I can stop carrying you around in my heart like poison. But forgiving you doesn't mean I excuse what you did. It doesn't mean we're family. It doesn't mean I'll ever see you again after today. It just means I'm choosing peace over rage. I'm choosing to live free instead of staying chained to you." He started to cry. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was sick. I didn't know what I was doing." I stood up. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You chose money over love. You chose greed over your own child. You chose to kill me 3 times. Those were choices. And choices have consequences. Goodbye, Gerald." I walked out and never looked back. On the anniversary of the night I almost died, I threw a party. Not a somber memorial, but a celebration of survival, of life, of joy reclaimed. I invited everyone who'd saved me. Ruby and her family, Simone and her partner, Victoria and the staff from her law firm, Garrett, the private investigator, Detective Kane and Dana Wright, Theodore, my therapist, my Uncle Isaac, and my mother's cousins, Wesley, who'd become my partner in every sense, Julian, Nora, and Cameron from the foundation. We filled my apartment with food and laughter and music, and I gave a toast. 1 year ago, I was dying in a hospital while my father tried to finish the job. But I survived because of every person in this room. Because Ruby trusted her instincts. Because Simone believed me. Because Victoria honored my mother's wishes. Because Dana fought for justice. Because Theodore taught me to heal. Because all of you refused to let evil win. I raised my glass. To survival. To justice. To love that's real and people who show up. To second chances and new beginnings. To my mother, who saved me from beyond the grave. And to all of us. For proving that the good guys sometimes win. I learned so much from this nightmare. I learned that evil exists, sometimes in the people closest to you. I learned that blood doesn't make family, love does. I learned that trusting your instincts can save your life. I learned that surviving isn't enough, you have to fight to truly live. I learned that grief is complicated, especially when you're grieving someone who's alive but lost to you forever. I learned that healing is possible, but it takes work, courage, and people who refuse to let you fall. Most importantly, I learned that my mother's love was real, powerful enough to reach beyond death and save me. That kind of love never dies. It transforms into protection, into preparation, into the evidence and allies that made my survival possible. Now, 1 year later, I wake up every morning grateful to be alive. I eat meals without fear. I drive without panic. I sleep without nightmares, most nights anyway. I work with the foundation and watch lives change. I love Wesley and let myself be loved back. I laugh with friends and hug my uncle and visit my mother's grave with flowers instead of tears. I am not the same woman I was before all this happened. That woman died in a way. But the woman I became is stronger, wiser, more compassionate. I built a life worth living out of the ashes of betrayal, and that's something no one can ever take from me. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever had someone in your life who turned out to be completely different from who you thought they were? How did you survive that betrayal? Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's support each other. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or realize something about your own life, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because there are so many more stories of survival and strength to share. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Together, we're stronger than the people who try to break us. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for bearing witness to the darkest chapter of my life and the bright future I built despite it. I hope my survival gives you hope. I hope my mother's love reminds you that real love fights even after death. I hope my journey from victim to survivor to thriver inspires you to keep going. No matter what you're facing, you are stronger than you know. You are worthy of love and protection and justice. And you are not alone, never alone. Keep fighting, keep living. Keep choosing love over hate, hope over despair, and life over the darkness that tried to consume you. That's how we win. That's how we honor the people who saved us and the people we've lost. By living fully, loving deeply, and never, ever letting evil have the last word.